I think that's the perspective maybe from the investors to say, there's still opportunity here. But from the producer side, I'm thinking about producers who are listening and are thinking, should I be doing this? Should I still have my heart in this? Should I still have my pockets in this? What are the shared opportunities and challenges?
Well, I think we're starting to tell our stories and starting to tell them bravely. The opportunities for us to showcase who we are globally. I think that, seeing our stories told on Netflix and having those accessible by everyone across the world is an incredibly wonderful thing, and shows that our stories can travel and travel globally. And I think from that perspective, there's really an opportunity for us to look at how we can take those stories out to the rest of the world and do it in every way possible. It doesn't have to be in English language. More and more people are used to watching subtitles, for example. So let's start focusing and concentrating on producing in indigenous languages and taking those stories out from younger producers with different types of stories. I think also moving on specifically from stories that I think on some levels we've been very stuck on telling our past, but starting to engage in where we are at this point in time and looking to the future and looking at genres we potentially haven't really kind of followed through on. I don't think we've had a very big South African science fiction film, for example. Is a time that we start looking at different kinds of genres we start investing in from that perspective. So really understanding our stories do travel, that it's not just stories that come from a particular genre that travels, but they're traveling more globally and trying to understand how we take those stories out. I know the documentary people will talk about the ability to be able to do documentary series, for example, that travel and makes documentary more accessible from a television perspective. These are key things for us. I think we do need to learn as we move along now and move away from just looking at us being a very television-focused environment as producers, starting to resource ourselves up a little bit more in terms of film and becoming more independent in terms of that. We need to start learning how to be proper producers, I think, which is a key thing as well. I think our reliance very often as independent filmmakers on either commissions or on getting money out of government is problematic. It's not going to grow us as an industry altogether. We need to learn how to go and find other funding sources. We need to go and find out how we can get money from the private sector and get that money in so we own our IP. I think the key thing for us is owning our own IP moving forward and being able to exploit that IP. And doing that in a way that from a business perspective and from a creative perspective in terms of how we script writing, what genres we're focusing on, who our audiences are, understanding you can produce for both a local audience and for an international audience. And I think that that's the place we have at this point in time as producers, is the world is opening up to us. How do we make sure that the legislative framework does that, but also resourcing and training ourselves? If we understand that our writers are mainly television writers, can they write for film correctly? No, they can't. Let's look at how we resource them up so that they can become film script writers. These are the kind of things that we need to be looking at this point in time to move us forward as we go into the future of the sector.
Definitely. So for a growing sector, there's new opportunities for new skills, but also upskilling people already within the sector. Nick, I want to bring you in here representing Animation South Africa. Firstly, just to understand, we've heard all the different touch points that exist just in the film industry. What are the different touch points for animation? What does that look like? And just if you can sort of position animation for us, and then from the animation perspective, what are some of the opportunities and challenges that exist for you guys?
We're quite similar to live action, but there are some very important distinctions that need to be made. And it's what Bobby was talking about earlier in terms of making a policy framework and legislative environment that can accommodate all the different nuances within the creative and cultural industries. And that's why it's so very complex, because we are so varied. Even within the same industry, we have different business models. And many people don't even appreciate that. So we are working in short form, like what you guys do at the CPA, but we're also working in long form animation. So we're producing features and series, but we're also producing ads. The vast majority, the bulk of all commercial activity in animation is commercial and corporate in nature. And the truth is that for the most part, what we do is we get voiceover artists to actually bring to life whatever we need to bring to life. And when they loan their voices to these projects, that you're referring to earlier is a cause for concern for us in terms of the Copyright Amendment Bill. Because when they give their performance for that piece, the legislation as it's currently drafted will mean that we are unable to pay them a buyout fee for their work. we would need to pay them royalties on an ongoing basis, which is very challenging given that these kinds of things come from a very finite and predefined marketing budget. And then once that's expended, there's no more expenditure, so there's no more earnings. But you can always argue about the exploitation, because when you create an ad, you're selling products and services. So, but when you do that, that is supposed to be the full encapsulated scope of the performer's contribution to the project. But if it isn't, and they're expected to continue to pay royalties on top of that, which, by the way, is just expanding on what you were talking about earlier, is apparently gross profits. This is how the whole thing is supposed to be. So it's permitted expenses after revenue, you know. So this is apparently how it's going to be calculated. And the truth of the matter is that they're simply not going to bring the work to us in that case. It's going to deter and disincentivize investment and service opportunities in animation. And this is something, another cause for concern is that they have this list of general and very specific exceptions to copyright protections and various limitations. And in general exceptions, it explicitly says cartoon and caricature. And in common parlance and in trade talk, cartoon is interchangeable with animation. So does that mean that animated works are not going to be protected? And what about the educational content that we produce, possibly PSAs, that is educational in nature? Does that mean that it doesn't employ, they not enjoy copyright protection either? So all of these for us are major causes for concern. I could probably wax lyrical, but I think let's move on. Yeah.
No, thank you for that. Katie, I want to come back to you. So maybe if you could just wrap up on that previous point, and then if you can just add to that then, for how do producers then align themselves to be able to take advantage of the opportunities that exist?